And we'll move on to the 10th, and I'll pick straight up with the squadron summary. So for the 441 Squadron, 16 sorties were flown in the morning in shipping patrols south of Beachy Head. In the afternoon, 7 aircraft made a sweep to Évreux and landed in France at 1400 for refueling and rearming, which was done in the very good time of 20 minutes. These were part of the first wing to land in France since 1940. The aircraft then took off from the landing strip, made a further sweep, and landed back in England. In the evening, the squadron patrolled the eastern assault area. So more freewheeling operations in the morning and afternoon, but back to the normal patrols for the evening. Now 442 gives us first official aircraft landing. Squadron leader Russell, accompanied by 3 pilots, took off at 0750 to land at one of the new strips in France. And that is AOG B3 at Saint-Croix-sur-Mer that I have marked in green, and that's going to be on the map from here on out, or at least for the next month or so. The wing was again on dawn readiness, overcast and cool. Briefed at 11:30 hours for another sweep to the new strip, left at 11:55, landed, refueled. Flight Lieutenant Marriott didn't land, engine trouble, returned at 14:25. The remainder back at 1800 hours, weather poor, clouds and rain, mud on their shoes, and German souvenirs in their pockets. No enemy aircraft sighted, though they flew a considerable distance inland, and it was all 3 squadrons flying these sweeps, as we'll see here in a second. Flight Lieutenant Dover and Flight Officer Robillard made a record for the CBC, telling them about the first operational landing of Canadians in Spitfires this morning, pictures taken, and more on that in just a second. I have some newspapers to show. The 3 squadrons away again at 1910, on a patrol, uneventful, and the 443 summary, weather cloudy and warm, 4/10 cloud and light rain, visibility 15 miles, weather much better for air support and army operations on the continent. Squadron on readiness for the second day. During the afternoon, 2 aircraft at a time took part in a convoy escort in the English Channel to a convoy moving west 10 to 15 miles off the coast. 5 aircraft took part in a wing sweep over northern France. No enemy aircraft sighted, no losses or damage suffered. 12 aircraft on low cover patrol over the eastern flank of the British beachhead, which turned out to be uneventful. And we can see on this squadron ops time 48 hours compared to those 80 or 90 hour days from the 6th, 7th, and part of the 8th. 442, 71 hours, still way up there. 441 was, well, it doesn't give a time, but I guarantee you that down day on the 9th was much needed, not only for the welfare of the pilots, but for the maintenance status of the aircraft. There would be just no way to sustain that level of sortie generation for more than a few days at a time, so I'm eager to see what the rest of the month looks like when it comes to flying. I would suspect there's going to be a little bit of a trough over the next week or two, and then picking back up at the end of the month, but we'll look and see later. So I'll start with the individual missions, and 441, 0500 to 1305, sections of 2 aircraft patrolling a large convoy of ships during the whole morning. So as we can see, it's 2 aircraft going up for about a couple of hours and then being relieved until 1305. Now the next mission up, and it doesn't note it in the 442 squadron's records here, but that would have been Squadron Leader Russell and 3 others making a flight out to B3. And in fact, I have this newspaper account that documents everything that went on at the field that day. So feel free to pause if you want to go through it. I'm going to come down to the note here about Squadron Leader Russell. It recounts an incident from 0620 that morning when Flight Officer Bill Smith in a Typhoon made an emergency landing there, so technically that being the first use of the field. And then 2 hours later, Squadron Leader Dal Russell, a Battle of Britain veteran, now on his 3rd tour of overseas operations, was the first Canadian to land on the strip, and a short time later, the United States had its first representative in the person of Lieutenant Fred Rutan, an 8th Air Force pilot whose Mustang developed wireless trouble and forced him down to this new and welcome base. But more on this a little bit later. Now the next mission up is a 1155 to 1415 fighter sweep, and this is the entire wing. Well, it's actually 5 or 6 aircraft from each of the squadrons going up on this sweep, the others standing alert or on readiness as they call it at RAF Ford. So 441 Squadron describes it as sweep to Évreux. These aircraft landed at the R&R strip in France for refueling on completion of the sweep, and again they formed part of the first wing to land in France since D-Day. 442 Squadron doesn't go into much detail on this first sweep. They simply state landed at R&R strip at 1400 hours, airborne from strip at 1550, and we'll look at that second sweep in a bit. Then 443 Squadron, weather cloudy and warm with 4/10 cloud with haze, visibility 15 miles. 5 aircraft joined 6 from each of 441 and 442 squadrons on a fighter sweep into northern France, saw no enemy aircraft and met with very little flak or ground fire, landed at R&R strip on the beachhead using it as a refueling and rearming point, and thus making 2 sweeps. Now the wing commander Johnny Johnson gives his account of this sweep, and I'll pick up at the landing. When our fuel ran low, we swept across St. Croix at 1,000 feet to have a good look at the general layout before landing. We had to make a fairly tight circuit to avoid the barrage balloons hoisted over vulnerable concentrations on the beaches. RAF servicing commandos guided our Spitfires into their various dispersals and were busy refueling the aircraft before we had even left our cockpits. In less than 20 minutes, they were ready for the air again. And he goes on to describe his time on the ground there, getting advice not to stray too far due to German snipers still in the area. He describes the occasional artillery shell hitting in the fields around the newly opened strip and the French farmers paying little heed and stolidly continuing to till their ground. And coming back to the newspaper account, and so it went all afternoon. Wing Commander Johnny Johnson's Canadian fighter wing was the first to land en masse following an operational sortie, be refueled and take off on another job. It's a pretty good read. Pause and check it out if you would like. And it also mentioned in the 442 Squadron description that Flight Officer Robillard and Flight Lieutenant Dover were photographed and interviewed by the CBC. Here's the photograph. There's Robillard on the left, Dover on the right. Now, while those aircraft were on the ground, there was a patrol by 443 Squadron, another convoy patrol in sections of 2, and that's described as simply aircraft took off on a convoy patrol south of Worthing, patrol uneventful, convoy heading southwest 20 miles south Worthing at 1350, cloud 4,000, 10/10ths, visibility good, and those continue on and off in sections of 2 until 1600. Now, having rearmed and refueled, or most likely just refueled since they didn't, from what I could tell, fire their guns, the 441 Squadron has the aircraft took off from the R&R strip in France, swept the Argentan area, landed at their base in England. 442 goes into some more detail. Airborne from strip at 1550, no enemy reaction. Marauders seen bombing bridges at 9755. Missed, still intact. Concentration of camouflage craft, 40 feet long, 8 to 10 feet high, in woods, uniform 0558. 200 to 300 boxcars seen in marshalling yards at these coordinates. Flak meager, accurate light, 10 miles south of Caen, weather 10/10ths, 3,000 to 1,800, 15 miles inland, 5/10ths to broken, to clear over the beachhead, visibility good. 443 gives much the same account, took off again at 1545, sweep to Avro, Argentan, Caen. No enemy action, Marauders seen bombing bridges, missed still intact, concentration of camouflage craft. In the woods, 200 to 300 boxcars seen on the marshalling yards, flak meager, accurate light, 10 miles south of Caen. And yeah, it is perfectly identical to the 442 Squadron account, which would have been transcribed off of handwritten mission reports after the fact. Probably at the end of the month, everything would have been gathered up and then typed out like we see it here. So in cases like this, where it's elements of all 3 squadrons, I would expect, and I don't think it's the first time we've seen it, for the accounts to be perfectly identical like that. So, as you can tell by now, I like to see this stuff. I don't want to just read about it. I want to see what they saw. So, bridges bombed by B-26s, missed, still intact at these coordinates. There's the bridge they were going after. You can see the bomb craters clustered all around it, and this photo was taken on the 25th of June. And at this point, it looks like that bridge, to me at least, it looks like it's still up, although several attempts, you can see, were made to take it down. Now, we had another call out of 200 to 300 boxcars and marshalling yards, and this is the exact location. This was taken on the 15th of June, 5 days after this mission. You can clearly see what they must have seen, a large number of boxcars on this marshalling yard, and we can see that this smaller siding, little pull-off area, was bombed and smoking, possibly even, or probably even, just a few hours before this reconnaissance photo was taken. So that's a good look at exactly where that was seen and what they would have seen from the air. So from there, we get into the last mission of the day, and this is an 1855 to 2110, another wing-sized low-cover mission over the assault area, just like we've seen over the previous few days. And 441 Squadron gives no further detail. 442 gives us 30 tanks seen dispersed and camouflaged on a road at these coordinates. 30 seen dispersed on a road at these coordinates. No enemy reaction, nil flak, weather 10/10ths, 2,000 feet over beachhead, 1/10th cumulus cloud inside coast. Visibility excellent. And 443 gives us aircraft provided low cover over eastern flank of the Allied beachhead. No enemy aircraft, no flak from Le Havre. Attacked by lightnings and thunderbolts, no consequences. So still more trouble with aircraft identification, but yeah, thankfully in this case, nothing bad came of that. And let me see, I must have missed, there were 3 callouts of 30 tanks at different locations. Okay, yeah, I remember what I did here. So for these tanks that we have down here, they were dispersed along this road, and then a second dispersal of 30 tanks down here just to the south. So this is actually in the American sector. This depicts more or less the lines as of this time, and yeah, there's no push out into this area until around the 11th or 12th. That's when 2nd Infantry Division and 1st Infantry Division start to push out to Calmont and the St. Lo area off of Omaha Beach. So these are definitely German tanks dispersed along a road. I have no overhead imagery from the time, but this is the road that they would have been dispersed on, just lined up. Now for a photo, I do have this screenshot that just happens to be from this area. This was, well, I think it was an exclusive screenshot for me for about an hour. Then somebody went and posted it, but I used this in a preview video that I did. There's the town of Cerisy-le-Fleuret. One of those concentrations would have been right there in this area. So that gives an idea of how this is going to look within the simulation once we get to fly around. And as I was lining all this stuff up, I was very pleased to see how closely the roads in the area, the towns, the forests match up to reality. So, I mean, what that tells me is that the maps that I'm using up here for calling out these locations are going to be very, very usable when it comes to finding our way around the terrain. That was the last mission of the day. All aircraft recover at RAF Ford, and we move on to the 11th of June. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you then.